Show me your calendar and I'll tell you your priorities. Recently, I was doing a coaching call with an agent who was telling me that they were feeling overwhelmed and didn't have time to get everything done they needed to get done. And so I said to them, which is something I'll often do, is I'll say, can you pull up your calendar and show me? And thankfully, they were confident enough to show me. And when they pulled up their calendar, I saw a lot of white space. And there was a few things in the calendar, but there was very few things that were actually blocked in there. That just because there's only a few things in the calendar doesn't mean that they weren't busy. The problem was is that they were busy reactively. They weren't actually planning out what they had to do in advance. There's something called the ideal work week that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to share with you in the 4 Ps. There's 4 types of meetings that need to be in your calendar. And at the end of this, I'm going to show you how you can look at your calendar and you can do a diagnostic to figure out if you're actually following through in this and how to feel less overwhelmed. Okay, so let me just tell you a quick story first about where this idea came from. A few years in the mortgage business and flat out busy, feeling overwhelmed, and everybody talked about time blocking. And to be fair, I didn't really do it that well. I thought about time blocking, but I didn't. Now my time blocking is pretty dialed, very dialed actually. But at the time it wasn't. And so I had hired this guy by the name of Josh Ship. He's actually a professional speaker and coach for universities and schools and stuff. He talks to kids. And I'd hired him because he had this idea that like you have to design work around your life, not the other way around. And so he's a successful entrepreneur. One of the things that he said was really helpful, and I've copied it and I've used this many, many times. It's called the ideal work week. And so what you do is you design your ideal work week. You look at it, you step back, you don't design a day at a time, but it's basically the full 5 days. And that full 5 day cycle, if you try to design too big of a month is too much, but a week is perfect. So you can figure out, I've got to have certain types of activities. For me, it's things like I have podcast episodes. I've got to have team meetings. I've got to have times for calls, and I've got to have coaching where I'm getting coached or coaching calls that I'm doing. So all this is built into my calendar. And so what I do now, before I say yes to anything, is I have this ideal work week and I have it built. It's actually in a Google sheet and it's the whole week. And I just figure out the blocks, the time blocks. I build in some buffers sometimes. And then I build that out and then I give that to my EA and say, this is how my calendar needs to look. And if you would look at my calendar and you look at the time blocking, they look exactly the same. But anytime I want to do something new, so back in January, I started doing these production-based masterminds with their agents. So before I even did that, before I even talked to my EA or made any changes, I mapped this out first. And then I said, okay, when can I do this consistently? What does it look like? My other commitments, put it into the calendar. And then it all was baked into the calendar. Those were recurring meetings. And so this is an example of why if you design the week, you can actually get everything done that you need to get done. But there's a couple of principles in order to make this work. And so what I did with this guy is I said, show me your week. And so he showed me, and there was only in the entire week, there's only a small number of activities booked. And what I realized is that he's busy, but not productive. And he's busy because there's an email that comes in. He's spending time figuring out where to put a file. He's getting pulled in 10 different directions, but he hasn't decided in advance what he wants to do. And the key thing here is with time blocking or with this whole strategy is you decide in advance what you're going to do. And that is the best strategy that you can apply. So the 4 types of things you need to have in your calendar, and I'll give you some other principles that work well for mortgage brokers, is you need to have prospecting time every day. So if I look in your calendar and you have no prospecting time and you say, I don't have any leads, I'm going to say, where's your prospecting time? And you say, well, I kind of fit it in around other stuff. For most people, it's the least fun thing to do, or at least the most challenging, and it's the easiest one to not do. And so prospecting time needs to be baked in there, and ideally every day. It's not something you just do sometimes. The next is your production time or your underwriting time if you're still working on files. There's 4 Ps I call it. So there's prospecting, production, people, and paperwork. Prospecting, obviously, that needs to happen. Production time, that's when you're actually working on files. And then the people time, that's client meetings. And then the paperwork, that's admin and email. And so what I recommend with most mortgage brokers, especially if you don't have a ton of staff or help, is that prospecting and production should be in the morning. And you don't even do, and I know some very successful brokers that don't even meet with clients or do meetings until after 11 o'clock or after 12 o'clock in the afternoon, because that way prospecting's done. If there's any files to work on that are priorities, they get done. And then they get into people stuff, as opposed to, and I saw in this guy's calendar, there was a client meeting at like 10 in the morning. But again, at 9 times out of 10, your clients will meet with you when works for you as well. And so block with that morning time to make sure the prospecting and production gets done. And then people and paperwork can be done in the afternoon. And then you have that in there. There's the other rule that comes to this is that you can never delete a block. You can move it. So let's say something does blow up. You have a file that's going sideways, conditions need to be done today. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get to the prospecting time today. That's fine. It gets moved to tomorrow. That means you do double tomorrow. And I promise you, if we do this, you're going to have a very successful business. It's the discipline of deciding in advance. If I said I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do it. And what happens is the more you do it, and what I love this from James Clear, he talks about you're basically making a vote for the type of person you want to be, right? You do this consistently and you'll have a very successful business. My biggest challenge for me now is actually not time blocking. I don't have enough white space. I am time blocked too much. I've taken it to the extreme, if you will, where there's literally, my day starts at 6 a.m. and it's blocked out all day long. And I got some buffers built in there, but it's flat on. I sit down and go probably 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But what I need is what I call white space. White space is time to think about strategy. Where are we going? What do we need to work on next? How do I come up with a framework for this? Like this idea of the 4 Ps. I'm having a framework for training so that people can take an idea and make it portable. This takes time to do, though. It's not something I can just do in an instant. And so for me right now, it's white space. And so quick recap on this. One, you got to have the 4 Ps. If it's on your calendar, didn't happen, or it's not going to happen, and you could say you're busy, but you're not productive. So you want to be productive, you need to have these 4 things: prospecting time, production time, ideally in the morning, people and paperwork or afternoon activities, and nothing gets deleted, but it can get moved. So if it doesn't happen today, you have to move it to tomorrow. That way it's always getting done. And I even have stuff that gets being booked on Saturdays because my team is like, hey, this needs to get done. And my EA, this is something that's useful for me. They'll put in links to something. If I've got to go do a course for one of my licenses or something, they'll have the links in there, all that stuff. So what I need to get done, what the date is. So I just drop into this recently, drop in, finish the course or finish the thing, and then it gets done. I'll give you one other quick example. So the other day in my calendar was call Kristen. And I didn't put it in there, but my EA did. And so I phoned Kristen. I'm like, hey, Kristen, how's it going? She's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, I don't know. I got in my calendar to call you. So I'm phoning you. And she's like, oh, right. Yeah, I sent you an email, some questions. So we had a great discussion. But I just go where I'm told. If it says phone X, such and such, I just pick up the phone at that time, look at my calendar and do it. The more you do this consistently, the better your business is going to be. And you'll be productive instead of busy. I hope you find that useful. Hey, I'm Scott Beckford. This is I Love Mortgage Brokering Podcast. And each week we create these episodes to help you in your business. And as I always say, there's no problem in your mortgage business that hasn't been solved by someone else. Your problem is finding the solution when you need it. Hopefully this podcast provides some of those answers. Thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.